Hello, my name is Lizette, and I did my project on My Elizabeth by Diana Abu Jabir. So, uh, I'll read through the slides. The story follows a Palestinian girl that goes by her American name Estelle. Um, While moving from New York with her aunt and uncle near a reservation, she meets an indigenous girl named Elizabeth and they become very close. Um, Throughout the years, Elizabeth shares her exploration of identity with Estelle until she is taken to live elsewhere due to issues with her mother's unexpected pregnancy and the law. As time goes on, Estelle hears about Elizabeth's return and tries to look for her with no avail. Estelle ends the search and moves back to New York, wondering what came of Elizabeth's life. My first interpretation of my project is going to be the psychoanalytical criticism. Throughout the story, there were many passages in which one could interpret in a psychoanalytical way. Many of the instances were with Estelle's dreams, and others were with certain characters or objects or ideas. I wanted to start off with Aunt Winifred. One of my classmates she explained how Aunt Winifred, was the mediator, but I also wanted to expand it by saying she was like the tie between individuals. We see that throughout the stories. Here's two examples. One being from the welfare lady and Elizabeth's mother, and the other one being Elizabeth, the ties between Elizabeth and Estelle. I wanted to take a closer look at Elizabeth Medicine Bow and her representation towards the mountains. Um, these are just two examples that I pulled where the mountains were explained first, and then soon after came Elizabeth's scenes. Um, and I feel like a lot of the times how the mountains were depicted and what they were doing reflected with Elizabeth's character or how she was experiencing things. The next individual I wanted to have a closer look in the psychoanalytical lens was the Sequoia man, or also known as Estelle's friend. I believed he symbolized death, um, mainly because of the objects that he had around, such as like skulls, skeletons, the cold, darkness, and the fact that Estelle had a dream or a memory of her father's death, and how after after the encounter between Estelle and the Sequoian man, Elizabeth's home was empty. Um, these two examples that I pulled uh, were what were the scenes that I described about the skulls and the dream of Estelle's father's death. Lastly, I wanted to bring the character of Estelle and the imagery and symbolism of trains that go attached to her. Similarly to Elizabeth and the mountains, Estelle was symbolized as a train. So whenever there was imagery of the train, whether it was finding tracks or being weak, um, it was reflected on how Estelle was feeling. I'll be reading from the slide, but during the reading, many of the characters showcased core issues, one of them being an unstable sense of self, and the reasons why were because of cultural repression and generational issues. The one less frequent was the Oedipal fixation shown for Shoshona and her immature relationships with men. Um, This could also be shown for Elizabeth and her relationship with older men that parallel to her mother, Shoshona. Um, to conclude, um, my psychoanalytical approach, um, it was a journey for Estelle to cope with losing her father and going back to her home to face what happened, and to grow as an individual as well. My second interpretation was the lesbian, gay, and queer criticism. One of the biggest themes I could find was heteronormativity. It showed up usually directed to Elizabeth or Estelle, such as their game of "That's Your Boyfriend" in middle school or high school. And the next one was when Estelle heard that Elizabeth was with her lover, but then was told later on that she was already married to Mr. Harrison and had children. Those were the biggest examples I could find of heteronormativity. Another big theme was homosocial bonding, um, between Elizabeth and Estelle, and a few erotic imagery, and especially in one scene. Um, Within those examples that I showed, there are also um, exterior forces that makes their connection so much deeper, such as with one, there's the when they first slept over and her aunt brings them tea, it is considered soothing. So, given the context, it made it seem that their relationship was something soothing. And the last example, which is at the bottom, was when Elizabeth started imagining or quote unquote seeing Elizabeth everywhere she went. I wrote down that it was the lasting effects of homosocial bonding between two same-sex people. Um, Something else was the similarities between Elizabeth and the Sequoian man, um, that were correlated with each other towards Estelle, such as the words being hypnotized, and the giving of a a feather, or more so the golden eagle feather. And they both correlate in the sense that they were both giving it to each other. And I meant it to conclude as in, but Elizabeth does symbolize the Sequoian man the same way that the Sequoian man symbolizes Elizabeth. Another theme was the words that Estelle used for judgment, which was voices and language, the specific words voices and language. And on my left, you can see when she used language and voice, and it was used usually as a term for judgment. Um, and on my right, you see how she battled, or more so faced, the judgment, or the personified versions of judgment. This correlates with the lesbian and gay and queer criticism because judgment is often shown to LGBTQ people, and they have to battle it in some way, face it. Um, Similarly to voices and language being used synonymously with judgment, we see the symbolism for Christianity and Catholicism that always looms over Estelle and Elizabeth. Some of the examples are on the left, um, and at the same time, we see the phrases that come from Estelle of coming out. This term in the queer community usually implies that they are queer and they want to announce it, and this is usually directed to Elizabeth. It could be that she wants to form a relationship with Elizabeth. To combat that, she also says it to Shoshona, but only once, and towards Elizabeth, she does it a couple times. This slide, I call it the train, the mountains, and the people, um, basically stating that the train represented Estelle, Elizabeth was the mountains, and the people were the in-betweens of the relationship of Estelle and Elizabeth. They could have been obstacles that they had to overcome. And to conclude it, I'm going to read from the slide, which was through the lesbian and gay and queer criticism theory. It is the story of Estelle learning of her identity and overcoming the judgment that is imposed on her by religion and others. It is also the story of Estelle's unrequited attraction towards Elizabeth. And because of my reflection being very long, I will summarize it as short as I can. I basically said how both the psychoanalytical approach and the queer perspective opened my eyes to the more possibilities of the story in terms of interpreting it. I also said how I can't choose which one is stronger, mainly because both of them are strong in their own unique way. Um, and in terms of close reading or intertextual context, I preferred both because both gave an element of depth within the story. I wish I could be speaking more about the story, but I'm very limited to a short amount of time, and I know I'm passing it, so I'm very sorry about that. And to top it off, this is my works cited. Thank you everyone who listened to this point, and I am very sorry again for making it this long.